turning off my video for a moment because my Wi-Fi is spotty.
Okay.
Okay, welcome everyone to our daily webinar. I see that we have folks already checking in, some of our regulars who've been with us with their name and where they're from. So if you are joining now and you'd like to do that, we'd welcome hearing about where you're joining us from. I'm Alexis Moreno. I'm the Be Strong Families Director of Measurement, Learning, and Development, sitting in for our usual host, Kathy. And today we are continuing with our Vitality webinar series with Alejandro Salinas. And we can go to the title slide. Our focus last week and this week has been about grief and the grief process and the grieving process. And today, Alejandro Salinas is with us to talk about dreams in grief and dying. This is part one. We'll have part two on Thursday. I'm seeing Denise from Maryland, Daniela from Philly, Laura from Illinois joining us so far. We can go to the next slide. And we're really excited about having Alejandro with us today. He is one of the architects of our Grief Compass deck that you may have heard about in other webinars or received an email about. And the deck is designed to be part of our Vitality Cafes, to be the focus of a Grief Compass Cafe, or to be used as one-on-one and as part of one-on-ones. Alejandro does dream yoga. He's a massage therapist. He's a teacher and guide and podcaster. And we're really excited to have him with us today. So ways to engage. We in this webinar format, we're asking you to put your comments in the chat today, put your phone on mute. If you're not talking, be patient with us. Sometimes there's a little bit of a lag time in the technology, but I'll be monitoring panel comments and questions in the chat and working with Alejandro to make sure that he gets those. And I think we can move to the next. We, as always, have our meeting agreements that we speak from our own experience, treat others how we would like to be treated, bring as much as possible our full attention. And given this topic, especially if you need to take a quiet moment away for yourself, please do that. And we have lots of folks posting, I agree, if you agree to uphold these agreements during our time together. We're really pleased to be bringing this presentation to you as part of the series on grief and grieving. We know that many of us and our families and our communities over the last 2 years especially have become familiarized or more deeply connected to grief and the grieving process. And the Grief Compass deck came out of our insights and our relationships with people and ourselves, and knowing that we were going to need to build our capacity and our understanding to move through the times that we're in. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Alejandro, and he has some other slides for us to be sharing today.
I do. Well,
And please
hello.
introduce yourself with anything that I've left out that's important for the group to know.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you to Be Strong Families and everyone here, and Kathy, Alexis, Jahira for having me and hosting me, and everyone for attending. Dreams and death and dying are things I'm really passionate about. A lot of my work revolves around it for a while now. I teach yoga, massage therapist. I consider my day job, and my night job is teaching dream yoga and hosting death cafes, which I've done for a few years now. And the topic of grief has recently become a lot more personal for me. My own dad died from COVID last year, so it's been quite a journey. And the dreams that I've had of him have also been incredibly helpful for myself and I'm just so excited to share. So, without further ado, let's see if I can full screen this all the way. We'll close out the Nine Inch Nails multi tracks. And then let's go to the top here. All right. So, I want to start with a poem by Rilke, which I absolutely love, and I'll read it. He says, "You, darkness, of who I am born, I love you more than the flame that limits the world to the circle it illuminates and excludes all the rest. But the dark embraces everything, shapes and shadows, creatures and me, people, nations, just as they are. It lets me imagine a great presence stirring beside me. I believe in the night." Ooh, I got chills reading that one, y'all. So the night, the darkness, dreams, and death and dying. This line, the darkness allows me to imagine a great presence. And in this context, I definitely think of dreaming of our loved ones and of loss and of potentials. So, simply put, what are dreams? This comes from Stephen LaBerge. He said that perception is dreaming with external sensory input. So perception being our objective sense of the world, right? Our shared reality, what we consider quote unquote true, what is to be true that can be verified against other accounts. We all experience gravity the same, more or less experience the same objects in a room, more or less even the same colors, although that's where it starts to get a little fadey, right? Our perception of things can be different. They have variations. Dreaming is perceiving without external sensory input. So, notice that the dichotomy here isn't true versus false. It is true versus free, right? Dreaming is the freedom of perception in which anything that we can imagine purely from our internal sensory input, this more subjective happenings in our brain are what dreams are. And I, for one, am not one to say that dreams are not real. Like, dreams are very real. They're real in the way our memories are. They're real in the same way stories and feelings are real. They're valid. While they may not exist in our external reality, other people cannot witness, experience our dreams. They're true to us, and their impact can be physically felt. So dreams are very, very real. So the connection of death and dreams goes back a lot, even so far back as Greek mythology. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but for a long time, all these things have been connected. We have Hypnos, the god of sleep. Thanatos is the god of death, the brother of Hypnos. Morpheus, the god of dreams, son of Hypnos. And even in the underworld, there's a few rivers. Most popularized by the band Styx is one of the rivers. But there's two other rivers called Lethe, or one rather, Lethe, that is translated either sometimes as like the river of forgetfulness or the river of oblivion, which I think is so fascinating. In one sense, a lot of our sleep that we have in our day-to-day life is obscured, right? It's forgotten. We even talk about blacking out for the night, which is to say that there is a hole of forgetfulness. And Going forward in death, we'll talk more about the practices of Tibetan dream yoga in a moment. But even the practice of dying is also, we can sometimes imagine as a process of entering into this void, of this like forgetfulness. And even the forgetfulness in the Mexican tradition, they say that someone dies two deaths. And the first is when the physical body dies, and the second is when someone is no longer remembered by anyone. There's no memory, is when someone has died the second time. So, liminal states, all of these things, grief that we have, the transitions, right? Liminal is a threshold, right? A doorway. It's not quite in one room, it's not quite in the other room. We're between places. We see this a lot in hypnagogia and hypnopompia, which are stages of sleep. Hypnagogia is the process of entering into sleep. And hypnagogic imagery is something you may have heard about. This is where you tend to see maybe like colors swirling, or some people have sounds that they get, even like the little itching that you sometimes might experience falling asleep, is all part of the hypnagogia. You're in between waking and sleeping. And this is also utilized in naps. If you've ever practiced yoga nidra, which I would love for you to experience. If you've never practiced yoga nidra before, I do teach a yoga nidra class Thursday nights at Inner Sense Healing Arts Collective. And yoga nidra is often referred to as like the yoga of sleep, but it also translates more literally into like to pull from the void, which I think is much more powerful in its uses, to pull from the void. And if we, again, going back to death, as viewing it as a sort of void, yoga nidra in one way connects us to not necessarily death itself, but to our thoughts, experiences of the deceased, of everything that is birthed from this darkness, like Rilke had said. We've also got hypnopompia. Hypnopompia is when we are waking up from sleep. So this one is often passed very quickly. Hypnopompia doesn't get a chance to breathe when we have alarm clocks that set off. We wake up jolting, bolting out of bed to make our cups of coffee or do our stretches or get to work or whatever it is. So if you have the luxury of sleeping in, of not having an alarm, or even just on the weekends, to allow yourself to, it's a real small practice of just catching yourself as you wake up, trying not even to move, because that starts the whole waking process. Trying to just stay still, notice that you're waking, start hearing sounds around the room. And this is another really fun in-between state. And the other, we're going to skip this real quick and jump to the experience of grief, is grief, right? For ourselves, as an individual who is grieving, the moments, especially, even a year of grief can feel liminal, right? We are beginning to live our lives without this person there. It's a transition. And we may experience, like, to a bigger or lesser degree. For me personally, losing my dad was huge. Person in my life. A lot of parents are animals sometimes. To lose something, someone, even jobs, right? If we lose a job, that is also an embodied sense of loss. Um, when there is love, there will be grief. So losing that changes our life. It transitions our life, and there's necessarily no ever coming back from that. Like life as it was, this like return to normal. Even with COVID, things are like returning to normal, but they're not ever going to be the same, and they'll be changed because of it. And Andrew Holacek, one of my favorite dream teachers in the Tibetan dream yoga tradition, he's a wonderful scholar. I would recommend all of his books. Says that the act of lucidity, which we'll talk about later, of how to work more directly with dreams in any context, but in this context of grief, that lucidity, the process of recognizing, waking up to our dreams, requires a change in our perception, in our actions. And so grief, we are also changing, right? It's not exclusive to death of loved ones. And you might have also heard of the stages of grief. I didn't put them up here. Recently, a lot of grief advocates and death workers, death doulas are moving away from these stages of grief, popularized by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and even and David Kessler. And even they originally didn't intend it to be for people who are grieving, but people who were dying. And so there's been a lot of misconceptions about the stages, which are denial, bargaining, depression, anger, acceptance. And David Kessler recently, I think in the last year or two, added meaning as a sixth stage. And he's also got a book on that. And even Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning is an absolutely incredible book that I reread to myself in quarantine, that has brought a lot of perspective and insight to me, and would highly recommend Man's Search for Meaning as well. So these stages, they're nonlinear, and there's no timeline either for these things. Yeah, and we often get insomnia, right? We can't rest. We have a hard time resting, moving through. Even in a day, we can feel angry, depressed, bargaining, and in any moment, you can be feeling a lot of anger for a month at a time and feel nothing else. Everyone's different. It'll affect everybody different. And getting sleep is super important. Let's jump right back here. I'll have more on Tibetan Dream Yoga in the second slide, but I do want to introduce this before we get into just some basic fundamental dream work. Right, Tibetan Dream Yoga is a set of practices. These traditionally came from Padmasambhava, legendary, by legendary I mean like mythic almost character, and apparently wrote what we now know as the Tibetan Book of the Dead long time ago, as long ago as any of these myths or legends tend to say. Wrote the Tibetan Book of the Dead and decided that we weren't ready for it yet. And legend has it that Padmasambhava hid the Tibetan Book of the Dead somewhere for a future disciple to find. And sure enough, many, years, centuries, who knows how long later, might have been passed by, where the Tibetan Book of the Dead was found. And that book describes in great detail the journey that one takes through death and dying. And in it is contained some practices for dream yoga. And I also always want to preface that these practices are non denominational. They don't necessarily require a certain set of beliefs, they're a set of practices. And so, no matter what one believes in life after death, about death in general, a lot of these practices are still equally applicable and valid. And so the whole goal, is for liberation of the mind, right? What we would call enlightenment or nirvana, or even in, Catholic Christian traditions of being in heaven. For myself personally, in my practices and my understandings, I view all those things as kind of one and the same. And so these practices, we say, right, we have endless opportunity for liberation. And this is where these transitions are, these thresholds. We have these transitions in any given moment. And at any given moment, we have a chance to liberate ourselves, of our minds, from what we are perceiving, into this more non-dual reality, which we'll talk in more detail next time. So in terms of lucidity, of just awareness, right? Another term for lucidity is just to be aware of what's happening as it's happening. Just by becoming aware of our thoughts, or becoming aware of the dream, or becoming aware of the process of dying. If you don't do it in this breath, you can do it the next. If you don't become lucid tonight, maybe the next night. If you don't become enlightened in this lifetime, then maybe next lifetime. Although I think enlightenment is often a overly romanticized idea. So I'm also here to de-romanticize the idea of enlightenment, and to really just have collective, increasingly larger moments of awareness, and increasingly larger sustained moments of awareness, and just collecting all those as we go. Not necessarily for enlightenment, but enlightening experiences continually. So, grief dreams. A lot of people experience grief dreams. There's also a really great podcast called Grief Dreams. And this guy interviews people, and they talk about their grief dreams, and they're really beautiful to talk about and to listen about. And sleep in general is super important for our health, our self-regulation, our psychic regulation, and emotional processing. And my first experience with this was maybe a decade ago. I had a big breakup. I was with someone for a long time. We broke up, and over the course of, in retrospect, many years actually, gradually had more dreams about my ex in ways that were very healing, and would gradually get friendlier, and over time provided that closure, peace, and reconciliation. Even though I never really had a conversation with this person, my mind, my emotions were processing conversations I would have liked to have had, or needed to have. And over
Alejandro,
time, yeah.
I'm sorry, we're getting a comment that there's a problem with the audio.
Oh, problem with the audio.
I hear you clearly, but if others can confirm that they can hear on the chat, that would be great. Okay.
Let me turn the gain up on. How was that? Is that any better?
I hear you clearly. I think it's louder. Okay.
Mute.
Looks like most people can hear, so I think.
Okay. Is it just kind of quiet? I can talk a little bit louder. I also turned the volume up on my interface.
I think it was Dorothy. I don't know. I'll post some things in the chat to her. Excuse the interruption.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, let me know if at any point someone can hear something or something like that.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, the mic can sometimes be kind of quiet. I turn it low, but cool. Talking about dreams, right? So you may experience a dream of a loved one. You know, I've had a few dreams that my own dad was in recently, and each time they're just so beautiful, and you can take it as you will. Some people call them visitations. I'm lean usually towards the belief personally that the dreams are my own creations for the most part. And so do I actually believe it was my own father visiting me? Maybe, maybe not. I've also had friends who've said my dad visited them and then sent a message to me because I wasn't dreaming at those times. So I'm one to say, who knows? Who really knows? There's really no knowing. We'll never actually know, and that's not even what is important.
Mm.
The most important is the emotional content that is there, working with that shadow work, the unseen, unsaid, unheard parts of our consciousness. So, beyond grief, dreams have a lot of uses, right? This process of self-individuation that Carl Jung talks a lot about, this building up of the healthy ego, you know, the acorn into the oak tree, the process of becoming who we were meant to be or becoming who we are choosing to be. Self-regulation of the psyche, like we said, healing trauma, the same, like this grief as a broad term of loss. Isn't always death of a loved one. There's all kinds. Dreams can be diagnostic. You can have a dream that, you know, you have like, you know, they got that information on time to heal from that with medical help. Earlier, we were talking about precognitive dreams. And so this kind of access into the collective unconscious is also really mysterious. And I like to walk the tightrope between science and spirituality. So things are interesting. Things are weird. I don't claim to have answers to how or to why, only that I have my own experiences and others have experiences on accessing the collective unconscious. There's problem solving. If you have questions, you know, like the periodic table was invented through a dream. He viewed the formation, or you know, we have songs that come in dreams, rehearsals. If you're practicing, I think there's been a few studies. I'm not 100% certain right now. I haven't double checked, so forgive me there. But that in dreams, that when someone practices a dream, practices a skill in dream, it does, like, we improve a lot. And even without the dream, sleep in and of itself, they have done different studies where they gave people tests and chance to take a nap in between taking those tests, or another group took the test at the end of the day without napping, and another group took the test again after a night of sleep, so the next day. And consistently, the people who either napped or slept or learned in the evening versus in the morning did improve considerably. So get some sleep. Decision making, sometimes big life decisions, we can ask our dream. Wish fulfillment, you know, everyone thinks about like having coitus with their favorite celebrity or something. is like the kind of archetypal learn to lucid dream, or even flying, is so common. Everyone flying in dreams, which is something that's impossible to do in our waking life. And it's so beautiful. Or any other kind of wish you may have. Those are the two most like stereotypical cliche ones, but literally like the sky is not even a limit. Endless possibilities. Simply connecting to our conscious, exploring our consciousness. There's so much that we don't know about either our own selves, our own brains, and dream work is such a beautiful way to take a look into that little window of the mind. And so many other people are never even aware that they're dreaming, and fewer people, a growing number of people, I think interest is gaining, are becoming lucid in their dreams. And becoming lucid in the dream gives you a chance to explore your brain, even your like nervous system, in a lot of really fun ways. Also pointing back to the Tibetan Buddhist monks. So much of the work that I see being done by Tibetan Buddhists is very experiential. I don't ever get the impression that they just simply believe us is to try it for yourself and see what happens for you, which I appreciate. Connecting to ancestors, similar to grief dreaming, similar to dreaming of a loved one. We can go even further back in your dream. There's energetic work. If you're into like Reiki, energy practices like that are phenomenal in a lucid dream, because suddenly you can actually have a ball of energy. You can actually, in a much more tangible way, see and feel an aura or a feeling tone or whatever it may be. Conscious dying, dream yoga, we've talked about. And the Dalai Lama says, like, the most, the main goal for dreaming practice is to just be more kind. To just be more kind. And, have fun while we're doing it. Because dreams are very playful, and we need that sort of playfulness to begin engaging with them.
We have a great comment in the chat from Tamara. She says, I've used lucid dreams for healing and controlling PTSD nightmares. I do enjoy them for fun things too. Flying is awesome, but even just doing the things my body can no longer do, like running and backflips.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. That fills me with so much joy. Thank you for sharing. They're beautiful. Dreams are literally the closest thing to like actual magic that I've ever encountered in my life. And it's a superpower of sorts that we can all cultivate. It's not like we all have this ability. It's just a matter of tending to it and nurturing it. But we can't have dreams unless we are sleeping. I had a friend who said that if lucid dreaming was a nightclub, then sleep hygiene is the bouncer. All right, so they're gonna decide whether you can come in the club or not, and we all want to be in the club, the dream club. And Andrew Holacek, funny enough, does have a website called The Night Club. And he interviews all kinds of awesome people and they talk about sleep and dreams and meditation. And it's incredible. I'd check it out, that podcast, if you're also looking for some extra stuff. So a lot of these are pretty well known. Some of this isn't going to be new. Just reminders at this point. We all know to not drink too much caffeine, right? And I'm also not for abstinence. We know that doesn't generally tend to work. So even minimizing, cutting back, right? You don't need to quit coffee. But drinking your coffee earlier and then not drinking so much later. Screen time is terrible. Screen time emits blue light, and you've probably heard this too. And the blue light inhibits the melatonin production. And melatonin is that sleep hormone. And the opposite of screen time is like candle light, or even low lighting if you can't do candles. But candles mimics the red light. And the red light is what we get when we get the setting the setting sun. And that starts cueing melatonin to bloop, produce, which is why if you are ever taking melatonin, they recommend you take it at sunset and not when you're planning on sleeping. Because hormones are very slow moving. And if you're going to mimic the natural cycles of sleep, you want to take that at sunset. So candles, be safe with your candles. Don't leave them unattended. Don't leave them on flammable things or surfaces. But I love candlelight to promote sleep. Regular sleep and wake times, which again can be difficult to do. But if you can, at least waking up at the same time every day, even on the weekends, will help you regulate, pardon me, your sleep better. Limit bed use to sleep and sex. If it's possible, sometimes we live in really small apartments and all we have is a bed to sit on, and that's okay. But if you can afford to, if you're able to, we only want to reserve the bed for these two things. Otherwise, we start getting in habits and it's not as conducive to sleep. Alcohol, cannabis, food before bed can disrupt our sleep. Your brain is doing a lot of work, especially in the first 5 hours of sleep is when we spend the most time in deep sleep. And in deep sleep is where human growth hormone is released. Our body is literally repairing, regenerating itself. It's shutting the body down so it can do the maintenance that we need to do to function, which is why drinking alcohol or smoking also inhibits dreams. Again, I'm not telling you to quit smoking weed if that's something you like to partake in. Enjoy yourself, but to be more mindful. Maybe not smoking an hour before bed. Maybe not smoking 2 hours before bed. Any amount. And you can slowly take it back and back if it's hard for you. I'm all for slow and steady wins the race here. And food. So if your body's digesting stuff, it's not spending the same amount of energy as it normally would to heal other things. Lower bedroom temperatures. Mindful activities such as meditation, yoga, reading, drawing, journaling. And the other great thing about these practices is they're mindful and they're also reflective. So not only are we working on narrowing our focus and our attention, which is exactly what we want for lucidity, literally the name of the game of mindfulness, but we also start reflecting. And that reflecting comes in handy when we are looking to dreams for meaning. And you don't always have to interpret dreams, but the first thing when interpreting a dream is to look to what happened the day before. What kind of themes are there? And so the more we expel these things, the more we put our inside outside on paper, or in a drawing or something like that, we get to see the things that are stressing us, and it takes the weight off of ourselves, so that we can fly, literally, right? We get lighter versus being weighed down by the stuff. In the same way you wouldn't, go to bed straight after running a marathon. You would probably want to shower. And so same, like these mindfulness activities are a sort of mental shower for ourselves before going to bed. It's going to let us rest much better. Sun and exercise early in the morning. Even if you're getting jet lag, again, sun will help reset your circadian clock. which is also a balance. I still sleep with a dark curtain, but get some sunlight, and that'll help wake you up. Earplugs. Get out of bed if you can't sleep. So especially in grieving, it can be hard to sleep, and trying to sleep is counterintuitive, right? We can't try too hard to fall asleep. You kind of have to let sleep happen. It's a fine line. So if you can't get out, if you can't get into sleep, get out of bed, and that's okay. We've I'm sure, had days on little sleep, and we more or less did okay. You may not want to drive on very little sleep. So take a lift if you really didn't get a sleep or something, because that's also dangerous. But we often stress ourselves out much more thinking about how little sleep we're going to get versus just accepting, hey, I'm not going to sleep too much. That's okay. I'll take a nap later. I'll sleep earlier the next day. Don't create more stress for yourself. And the average time, I'd say, is like 20 minutes. If you're in bed for like 20 minutes, half an hour, get out of bed, do something else, go back to the mindfulness practices to help lull you to sleep if you can. And keep your room clean, right? Clean room, clean vibes, less clutter, mentally, internally, all good stuff. So I'm not going to spend too much time here in the stages, but there's waking. NREM 1 is non-REM, right? Rapid eye movement is when dreaming happens. We kind of dip in and out of all of these. In a sleep cycle, which is about 90 minutes, more or less, everyone is different. And if you really want to find out for yourself, you can keep a log. Keep a little journal and track, just when you went to bed. If you wake up in the middle of the night at all, you can put that down. And over time, you really start to see, oh, wow, my sleep cycle, it may be 80 minutes, or it may be, a little bit longer than 90 minutes, maybe 100 minutes, who knows? But on average, tends to be about 90 minutes. And we get more REM time in the last 3 hours, in an average of 8 hours sleep. So the first 5 hours of sleep, we spend maybe 10 minutes of that time in REM. So it is possible to dream earlier in the night, but more often than not, you're spending time in deep sleep, which is where that human growth hormone happens, where our body is doing the most work to heal ourselves in a lot of different ways. So if you're sleeping 6 hours, it might be much harder to even remember dreams. And it's unfortunate that for a lot of people, 6 hours of sleep is their average. So even getting an extra hour of sleep can really change how much REM we have. And if you are sleeping 8, or even, I know people who sleep 9, 10 hours in bed, those dreams towards the day versus in the beginning of the day, or the night rather, we have 10 minutes. Sometimes these dreams in the morning can literally be 45 minutes to an hour. So if you've ever had a dream that felt like it was 45 minutes or an hour in the early morning, or maybe you went back to sleep early morning, it's likely that, yes, it actually was that long. And another common myth, dream time is pretty much the same as our waking time. And they've also done, with Stephen LaBerge, a really famous dream scientist, where they've gotten people lucid and had them give an eye sign, because you can see the eye movements change. So they give a very specific eye pattern that they agreed upon, and they'll count to 10 in their lucid dream and then do the eye pattern again. And it more or less actually does correlate to the amount of time there. But what does happen in dreams that can make it feel like you've dreamt a long time is much more theatrics. You know, the way we watch movies or theater, there's like the setting sun and like the clock change or like the scene change and the lighting is different. And if you've ever seen Pixar's Inside Out, where the dream team is like literally like SNL and they're like, all right, everyone on set, like we're going to do our job. So it's fun. And that's another great movie I'd recommend. But yeah. So moving on. Dream recall. Okay, so if you're not... Okay, so we have had enough sleep, right? And now we're starting to remember our dreams more. And it's hard to work with dreams if we're not sleeping and if we're not remembering them. Because we can be getting enough sleep, but we might not be remembering them still. That's its own separate practice. So we already said we need over 6 hours. Ideally, 8, 9. Also, every body is different. Your body may not need 9 hours of sleep. That might be a totally unrealistic thing for you. That's okay. I personally tend to be like a 7.5 hour kind of sleeper. My body just naturally wants to wake up around that time. So whatever's best for you, when you can, sleep in, take naps. The most important thing is to set the intention to remember. Right, back to the river Leith, this river of forgetfulness or oblivion. Our bodies are naturally disposed to forget dreams. And so we do have to practice not erasing them from our memory. We usually do this through journaling. Handwritten is the gold standard, I would say. The actual physical process of writing slows down our brain. It is a physical process. It's an embodied, muscular process. All of that helps us learn and remember more. But some people aren't into journaling, or your room is too dark. Get a red light. I keep a red light bulb in my room, or you can get little pens with lights on them if having a whole red light is too much. Some people just use a voice recorder. And this is also really good for liminal dreaming practices in like a nap or something when you don't want to move at all and you want to stay in that sort of, liminal space. Intermittent waking. That's just waking up throughout the night. You can set alarms for yourself. I would recommend setting an alarm for like 5.5 to 6 hours after sleeping. Or even if I've only really done this on like a retreat or something, when I really have the time to like mess with my sleep in ways, is to wake up every 90 minutes or 2 hours. I sometimes skip the first 5. So sleep for those 5, but after those first 5 hours, wake up. And then I get up for a moment. You have to wake up enough and then go back to sleep to write. Just not like get up, do jumping jacks or anything, but, use the bathroom, make some notes in the dream journal, set the alarm for 90 minutes, go back to sleep. Repeat as many times as you can until you can't fall asleep again. Is a fun practice. And every time you wake up, ideally, you'll be remembering a dream. And any dream you've ever remembered, even if it felt like it was in the middle of the night, you had to wake up momentarily to remember to begin with. If you want to keep still, don't move too much, right? When we start moving, our body starts turning those engines to wake up again. So the more still we can be, the more we can remember. And ideally, you can even get back into the position you were when you were sleeping. So maybe you're on your left side, you roll over to your right to turn off your alarm, but go right back onto that left side. Or if you're on your back, stay on your back, whatever it is. Looking at a phone first thing in the morning is not the best thing. And that's like a it's like a Men in Black when they do the memory eraser thing, just pew, womp, just like wipes it out, and that's kind of rough. So keep the light low, and jog your memory. Sometimes I say, okay, was there anything? What like colors were there? What people were there? What was I feeling? Was there anything with the letter A, B, C, D, E? You just go on, like all kinds of things that seem really simple, really silly, even sometimes. But you'd be surprised. Sometimes just one little thing's like, and then you suddenly have a dream. And even the process of writing down, even if you're like, all I remember is this thing, as you write it, you'll notice sometimes you even start to add more detail in describing it on the paper. And then suddenly it's like pulling the thread, and suddenly you have so much more of the dream there than you originally thought that you did. And even in my morning meditations or even in the shower, if you're still have the intention of remembering, sometimes those dreams will still pop up. I'm sure you've had that. You're talking with someone, at work, and you're like, oh my God, you just reminded me of a dream that I had last night that I forgot. So we're developing a relationship with our dreams. And just like any friends, we want to befriend them. So writing our dreams down is letting the dream know that we're listening, that we want to have a conversation with them.
We have a question in the chat, and I don't know, Alejandro, if this is something that we'll have time to get to today in the time that we have left, or maybe for the next session. But the question is, what happens if your dreams become nightmares?
We will be talking about that. We'll be talking about nightmares because we'll talk that more about in dying. Or rather the process of dying, which I've personally never done yet. But especially in the Tibetan practices, the falling asleep parallels the process of dying. And the dreams parallel the experiences we have in death, if we're aware of them. And a lot of those experiences, what they call the Bardo realm, also tend to be very terrifying. So nightmares, I do have one slide from this one. We may or may not get to it, actually, but we'll definitely talk more about that.
On Thursday, at part 2 with Alejandro.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a dream journal template. Also really quick, just a date, a title can be helpful. The dream in first person, the theme or the genre. The genre sometimes can come later, if it's like it turned out to be a precognitive dream, or if it's like an anxiety dream, if it's a grief dream, etc. And the title also helps with the theme. It really lets you pick what the most important or the most pronounced object in the dream was. Any mood, emotions you had, any thoughts or beliefs that you had in the dream, not about the dream, but in the dream. I thought, I believed that this was it. And then your reflections are then your thoughts or beliefs about the dream versus in the dream. Dream signs. So we also want to write dreams down so that we can find dream signs. So not just for interpretation, but getting familiar with our own personal dreamscape. And so look out for things that are out of the ordinary, out of character, out of this world, out of nowhere, out of line, out of sync, out of balance, control, order, place. And you'd be a lot surprised. A lot of stuff is just out of whack in dreams. And those are all dream signs. And a dream sign is something that's going to tell you, hey, this is a dream. And the reality checks, right? We're differentiating the subjective versus the objective, right? The perception versus the dream. And in waking, these reality checks is like fact checking, right? Is this real? How do I know that this is real? Is this a dream? Don't pinch yourself. As a massage therapist, I'll tell you that pain is largely an experience created in our brain. Not that it's in your head, that you're making it up, but that it's not necessarily in your muscles. The neurons are sending messages up to your brain that says, wait a minute, that's supposed to hurt. And so then it gives that signal to hurt. And there's a lot of dysfunctions where people either don't feel pain or they feel excessive pain. And that's mostly neurological things. So what can we do? I like to jump. Gravity works 100% of the time so far on Earth here. Not so in dreams. So that's one of my favorite little ones. It can be kind of silly if you're doing it out and about. The nose pinch. Remember in The Matrix where Morpheus says to Neo, do you think that's air that you're breathing? It's not. It's dream air. And it's your dream nose. There's no actual air passing through. You can reread. That's looking at text or clocks and looking back again. And even imagining them changing. I do this sometimes when I'm looking at billboards while I'm driving real quick or in traffic at a red light. I'm like, wait a minute, can I change these letters here? Is this a dream? And looking at our hands. Our hands are here, but there's something about bringing your physical, quote unquote, physical dream self into the dream that brings another sense of awareness. And that's a good one. And you want to perform reality checks with the dream signs. If your dream signs happen in waking life, right? Let's say maybe you dream about talking dogs. Maybe you don't come across any actual talking dogs while you're awake, but okay, every time I see a dog, I'm going to do a reality check. Or anytime I'm feeling a certain emotion, I'm going to do a reality check. Or anytime, things feel a mess, or sometimes just that threshold, sometimes just passing a literal door, right? Because you just pop up in the dream sometime. All right, let's a few more things here.
Maybe one more slide. I think we're getting close to our time, and I know we have so much juicy stuff to cover today.
I know there's so much to cram in. Dream planning, we're not going to do this, but this is a little practice. You can take a mental note of planning your dream, of incubation, some people call it. So if tonight you want to start practicing getting lucid, one of the first ones is the mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, so mild. So re-script. You wake up from the dream, remember the dream. So we're going to re-script. So, okay, we have the dream. What do you want to change about the dream? And then rehearse that. In the same way, a mental rehearse, going through those processes. And then remind yourself, okay, the next time I'm dreaming, I'm going to become lucid and I'm going to do this thing, right, from that dream plan. Prospective memory is the same kind of memory you have that says, oh, the next time I'm at the store, I have to pick up, some peanut butter or whatever it is. I have to remind myself the next time I pass, I leave the house, I need to take out the trash, whatever it is. You're remembering to do something in the future. So that's another really helpful skill, remembering to do something in the future. So re-script, rehearse, remind. And there's one more I'm going to get to real quick is wild, the wake initiated lucid dreams. So this is when we wake up from a dream in the middle of sleep and go back to sleep consciously, right? Or wake back to bed. And usually we recommend when you wake up from a dream, maybe after those 5 hours, to stay awake for 20, 30 minutes and then go back to sleep. And we can count or visualize, like moving your hand or your finger even, or even imagine sitting up without actually sitting up. And just try to stay aware, mind aware, body asleep, as you go to bed. And you may or may not find yourself witnessing the dream form literally around you. And Wednesday nights, to close it off, I do teach stream yoga at 9:30 p.m. Central Time through Inner Sense Healing Arts Collective. And it's a class where I literally put you to sleep, guide you to sleep. We'll do a little yoga. We do some yoga nidra. You can do it straight from your bed. I say good night, sweet dreams. Don't even take you out of Shavasana. And send you right off to dreamland.
Wonderful. Well, I don't know about you all, but I'm more excited than I usually am about going to sleep tonight. We do have a quick poll we're going to ask you to fill out in the 2 minutes we have left, and going to put up some slides to remind you that this is part of our webinar series. We will have Alejandro with us for session 2 on Thursday. On tomorrow, we have the financial vitality after the death of a loved one, because not only is the grief process a spiritual and emotional process, but there are those logistical things that we have to take care of in our lives. So we'll be covering that tomorrow before we return to dreams with our really capable and lovely guide, Alejandro, who shared so much juicy, good content with us. And we look forward to having everyone back and Alejandro back on Thursday with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for all the good stuff. We'll see
Sweet
you all on
dreams.
Thursday.
Peace.
Oh, Grief Compass, it's there on the screen. We'll talk more about that on Thursday as well. Our new deck, I previewed that at the beginning. So please go to our website if you're interested in thinking about grief and the grieving process and having some of the insights that Alejandro shared be part of your conversations in your community. Thank you, everyone.